Oaks in Hardeman County. Beautiful place over here that UT runs. At this point, I'm going to welcome Ben West, who is with Lone Oaks, to tell us a little bit about the place.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, on behalf of the University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture, we want to welcome all of you here to Lone Oaks Farm for what has hopefully become an annual tradition. I think the commission's met here every October for the past 2 or 3 years. We hope that keeps up. We'd love to have all of you here. If you've not been here before, or if you have been here, you know that this is a pretty special place. I mean, it's not, you don't have to ride around on this property very long or catch a big bass in the big lake, Commissioner Cox, to realize this is a pretty special place. But it's not the place that makes it special, even though this is a magnificent property that the university was really lucky to acquire 4 or 5 years ago. It's not the place that makes it special. It's the people that come here and the vision that we have with them developed for this place to create the best outdoor education center in the country. A lot of people have bought into that vision. We're really fortunate to have all kinds of partners here at Lone Oaks Farm. FedEx gave the largest gift to the University of Tennessee in its history to create an outdoor education center. Department of Agriculture, USDA, I could go on, Farm Bureau, lots and lots of partners, but we don't have a friend and a partner better than TWRA and the Fish and Wildlife Commission. We're so excited about the work we have done together, the work we will do here together to get lots and lots of people outdoors and learning about the outdoors through this special place with lots and lots of partners. I just want to highlight a couple of things that we are doing here and do here along those lines. Lone Oaks does lots of things, lots of events like this. People have weddings here, meetings, all kinds of stuff. But 2 things that we do here that's really fundamental to our vision. First of all is our K through 12 STEM education program. So we came up with this idea 4 or 5 years ago that how do we introduce populations of kids to the outdoors that don't come from a community or come from an area or from a family where outdoors are important? Well, we stumbled across this idea that every school in the state, private, public, and homeschool, has lots of direction and interest in STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. Every school, whether you're an inner city school in Memphis, a rural public school, a private school, or a homeschool, every school is interested in that. And you can teach every facet of STEM through the lens of the outdoors, through wildlife and through fish and through soil and through water and through agriculture. So we said, what would it look like if we started an education program that got schools to bring their kids here to learn about STEM, but everything was in the context of the stuff we all care about? We launched that program about 4 years ago now. Even with COVID, this year, we'll have about 4,000 kids coming here, engaged. You may have seen some of them. We got a few kids on the farm today doing outdoor education through the lens of natural resources and agriculture and fish and wildlife and all those things. We think long-term, 10 years from now, we'll have 30 or 40,000 kids coming here a year from all kinds of communities, urban communities, suburban communities, rural communities, public schools, private schools, and everything in between. We're really excited about that. In order to accommodate that growth, we need a couple things. We need people, and we're hiring more people. We've got, as an example, a partnership with NRCS to hire someone to do K through 12 STEM education through the lens of soil and water conservation. We also need more facilities. And so when we do the hayride and tour a little later, and some of you have already seen this big construction project on that side of the farm, that's the very first construction project for the STEM and 4-H Youth Education Center that will allow us to ramp up the number of kids that we can bring here every day. So really excited about that. And we can talk about more about that when we do the tour. The other part of the farm that I wanted to highlight is the clays at Lone Oaks Farm, a clay target and hunter education facility funded largely by the commission and the agency through Pittman-Robertson funding. Really excited about that facility for a couple of reasons. There was a real hole in this part of the state in public shooting facilities, and we wanted to put a facility on the ground to reach everybody, but particularly try and bolster youth shooting in this region. and we've been pretty successful. That facility opened in March of this year. As of today, we've thrown about 175,000 targets, and about half of those are for kids. So really excited. A few youth shooting teams have cropped up just because they now have a facility. We're going to be hoping to expand that. The other reason we're excited, and you'll get a chance to see the facility later this afternoon when we do the hayride, is we said from the beginning, we don't want this just to be a shooting range. We really want it to be an education center. And so we've done the first installments of some educational signage and resources to help people who come there understand where the money comes from to fund conservation and how conservation emerged in the U.S., which is different than most of the rest of the world. So really excited about those things and excited to share them with you more later. Last thing I want to say is this. Several people have said, have asked me, do I work here? And I really don't. I work for the University of Tennessee. My job is to try and take a few special projects at any time and try and make them happen through partnership and through developing, relationships with others. Lone Oaks is a big part of what I do, but I've got probably half a dozen projects at any one time that I work on. A lot of the projects I'm working on right now are trying to elevate the visibility and impact of natural resources at the University of Tennessee. We're hopeful to elevate the Department of Forestry, Wildlife, and Fisheries to a school of natural resources. That's going to be a big step. There's not a school or a college of natural resources at any university in Tennessee. We're going to be working to try and transform Ames, some of you were there this morning, into a world-class forest and wildlife research center. We're looking at trying to create a center for outdoor recreation to do outreach and education and community support to try and get more people outdoors. And earlier this year, I was fortunate, one of the highlights of my career, to be involved in something that is kind of the foundation of that for the university. And earlier this year, if you didn't know it, the University of Tennessee bestowed upon someone an honorary doctorate. The University of Tennessee doesn't give away many honorary doctorates. We've given away about 20 in our history, and we give them to people like Howard Baker and Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx, Dolly Parton. But as of this spring, we got the latest honorary doctorate given by the University of Tennessee to someone I think you all know who might be here, Dr. Bill Dance. I was really fortunate to be able to write his nomination, and I started it with this sentence. And it says kind of all there is to say. Bill Dance is a Tennessee icon, and we're glad you're here with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. I'd like to say thanks to the commission for the great job you did, TWRA staff, to you, Director Wilson, to you and your great staff, and thanks for the fishing lessons this morning, Bobby, and especially you guys go top. You have a bunch of great people, and I certainly enjoyed being with you today. It's short, but we got to hit back with it. So thanks again for everything. Thanks for the great job you did. Appreciate you. And be sure to watch Bill's music video that's on right now. It's excellent. Want to recognize some special guests that are here tonight or this afternoon. Lisa Holmes, who's our Region 1 administrator. Where's Lisa? All right. Let's see, Brian Thompson, who's a retiree from Region 1. Where's Brian? Pam, is it Morphus? Is Pam here? She's also a retiree from Region 1. John Moore with Quail Forever. Josh, okay. Who wrote this, by the way? I can't remember. Hey, Josh, thanks so much. And of course, Tiffany Maxedon. Tiffany, thank you for being here. And Terry Baskin from Quail Forever. Terry? Yeah. And Kenny Evans, also from Quail Forever. Yeah. What's that? And Wally Childress's wife, Tracy, is here. Tracy, where are you? Where are you? I know you're here.
I think she went around making camp.
Oh, okay. All right. Already bored with us. Well, that happens. Okay. Danette, would you call our roll, please?
Tommy Woods,
Here.
Angie Box,
Here.
Monty Ballou,
Here.
Stan Butt,
Here.
Wally Childress, Bill Cox,
Here.
Chris Devaney,
Here.
Jimmy Granberry,
Here.
Steve Jones,
Here.
Brian McLaren, Kent Woods, Hank Wright, Jim Ripley.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Danette. At this time, I want to recognize Bobby Wilson, our Executive Director, for his report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Typically on the report, I kind of give an overview of things that have been going on the last month. And it's my activities, especially because I think the commission would like to know what I've been up to. And so I usually give the report about usually meetings that I go to or events. And so I was at the Mississippi River Monster Catfish Tournament that took place back on September the 18th and down in Memphis. And it was a pretty cool event. I think Commissioner Box will talk a little bit more about that tomorrow morning, maybe. Also, I went to an event at the Harpeth Scholastic Shooting Complex back in early October. I attended the Governor's Environmental Stewardship Awards. The governor was there, of course, and he made some comments. It was awesome to see him, but I also was able to see former Director Gary Myers there, and I've spent some time with him, so it was great catching up with him as well. I went to the on-site visit to the Ridgestone Firestone. As you know, we had a public meeting there back on October the 4th. I attended that as well. We had a R3 meeting. It was a Zoom meeting, but we started the second meeting. I guess we've started on the R3 process of getting that plan, the state plan, going to get going, and it's several committees have met since then, so we're excited about that. Met with the State Lands Group of TDEC and Department of Agriculture back in the middle of October. Went to Delta Waterfowl. They had an event on October the 7th. I attended that as well. A trout partnership celebration back just last week. It was a acknowledgement of this partnership that the TWA is part of with TVA, as well as Georgia Department of Natural Resources and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on the mitigation trout. And Commissioner Granberry attended as well, and it was a great event to be part of. So, and of course, the monthly meetings that I go to with the Department of Environment Conservation, David Salyers, and Charlie Hatcher with Department of Agriculture. So I just want to mention, and also last week I was at the Southeast Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. We had about 10 or 11 employees attending there, and it's a great, they get a lot of value out of it by attending presentations and meetings and things like that. And Commissioner Monty Blue was able to attend as well, and he can speak on behalf of a commission there too. And then also finally, I wanted to acknowledge today's activities. I want to acknowledge and thank Lone Oaks for making the clays available to several of our staff members. Ames Plantation, they held a quail shoot there that was sponsored by the Chickasaw chapter of Quail Forever, and Mr. Dave Loshinsky was heading that event. It's already been mentioned about the Quail Forever volunteers, Terry Baskin and Kenny Evans and Josh Moore. Thank them for helping as well. And there may be some UT Martin students, if you all raise your hand. I'm going to say the names, and you may or may not be one of them, but Luke Adams, Luke Wren, Austin Morphus, Colton Beasley, and Jacob Rose. Thank you all for helping out as well. And then the last activity today, I was fortunate to spend some time with Bill Dance on the lake here, along with Commissioner Bill Cox. And it was a special day, just being able to spend some time with him, whether or not we caught fish or not. As expected, Bill Dance caught more fish than the rest of us. And that's about all I got to say. Oh, wait a minute. One other thing. Commissioner Bill Cox did catch a couple of big fish. So that's all. Thank you.
All right. All right, I'm sure he wouldn't have done that if Bill Dance hadn't been there. But anyway, with regard to the TVA event in our local paper back home, the Mountain Press, there was a good picture of you and Commissioner Granberry releasing fish. That was neat. Glad you were able to do that. All right. Are there any announcements from commissioners at this time? Yes, sir. Commissioner Blue.
Chairman, I'd just like to say thank you. I did have the opportunity to go to that Southeastern Conference with the TWRA staff, and it was very informal, informational, and educational. And a lot of the UTM students that are back there with us today attended that same very conference. So they turned around and drove from there all the way back down here to help put on this quail hunt. So I appreciate the commission the opportunity to go attend that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any other announcements from commissioners? All right, hearing none. At this time, I'm going to recognize Jennifer Wisniewski. How'd I do on that? Okay, good. To talk about Buffalo Ridge. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. So, kind of fitting to give a Buffalo Ridge update in a facility that is our vision for Buffalo Ridge for the future. So, Buffalo Ridge is the one property that the agency owns that is under the outreach and communication branch, and for good reason, because we're building a flagship educational facility there. And you will see some progress that has been made, some very exciting progress. But and you'll see Lance here, but Don Hasse, the sort of ringleader out there, has he's at a better place than here right now. He's in Montana hunting elk, so he couldn't be here to give you the update, so I'm here to give it for him. But Don and Freddie and his crew and the engineering staff have been doing a phenomenal job getting this project going. So let's see. So this is an overview of what's happening, and this is fresh. This is this week. Some of these pictures are from yesterday, but not that one, that one. So you'll remember the conceptual drawing. So we're going to have a lake, we'll have the shooting ranges, and then the major educational facilities in the middle. So kind of keep this in your mind as you see the pictures of the progress as we go forward. And engineering's goal is to be done by Thanksgiving, and they're establishing grade and erosion control on the pistol range and a portion of the rifle range. They've got a lot of stuff going on. And these pictures don't do the size of this project justice. But you'll see that there's a crew of 3 folks that have overcome weather challenges, COVID challenges, and other challenges to get as far as they've gotten here. And here you'll see the pistol berm covered with a sod. So that pistol berm is like a 5-story building if you turned it on its side. I mean, it's huge. So these are, Lance took these this week. So this is up to date. Am I right, Lance? Yesterday. And there it is. So I'm just going to read this because I don't speak construction. But it is phenomenal what they've been able to accomplish so far. Just to get the grade level 500 yards, they had to add an additional 15 feet of soil all the way across the 500-yard area, which encompasses the rifle and pistol ranges. And in addition, they had to add 50 feet of fill to create the berm for the pistol range alone. So the pistol range is in essence a 5-story building. So once all of this dirt moving is done, then the construction on the buildings will start. But they've had just that grass area is where the new lake is going to be. But I mean, if you get a chance as you're driving back to Nashville to stop by and see some progress, I'd encourage you to do so. And this is right before they put the sod on it. So they've taken all these steps to account for erosion to make sure that what we build stays. And there's one of the culverts there at the Pistol Bay. And there's the erosion control mat. Another culvert. Another pistol range culvert. And there's the overview of the site again. So, all in all, we are still on track to hit our timeline of being completed by next summer and have a facility to have a grand opening of and have, 3 new employees that you guys have already approved to have those folks on staff to run the place. And Freddie, Lance, what would you guys like to add that I'm missing? I haven't seen Jay. Yeah, and our vision for Buffalo Ridge is it for to be the same kind of volume that Lone Oaks wants to run through here. So we're talking tens of thousands of students a year that would go through and learn about the outdoors and have that be part of their education in grade school, K through 12. What questions can I answer?
Jim.
Yes, Commissioner Granberry.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to all the staff for the wonderful work. I think for the most of the commission, especially the new, Bobby, could you give us just a little brief update on how we got Buffalo Bridge and recognize Mr. Beasley and his generous donation? I think it's important to always remember that moving forward.
Sure, Commissioner Granberry. So I remember going back probably 25 years or 20 or 25 years, Mr. Tom Beasley has allowed the use of his property for various special events like women's hunts, youth hunts, wounded warrior hunts, and things like that. And I'm not sure the exact date, but I'll say 5 years ago, he offered it up for sale at a reduced price. So we were able to buy it at, I think it was 75% of appraised value at least. And so we're able to use that reduction in price for the match. So basically we just used almost 100% PR federal dollars to buy that. And ever since then, we've been improving what was already there. And it's the Jennifer already said it, but Don Hussey and Lance and Freddie have just done a phenomenal job out there. James, I won't name everybody, but James Askins, but just working around the clock all the time, getting things done. It's a fantastic place. It's going to be it'll be our showcase for sure for outdoor events, for outdoor education. And we're excited about going forward. And we probably won't rest our laurels and say this is the only one we're going to do. We're looking at a possibility of building something like this in East Tennessee as well.
Any other comments? All right, Jennifer, thank you.
Can I make one little update?
You can do
So, or
whatever you want.
announcement maybe. So last year, for the first year in our e-store, if you go to gooutdoorstennessee.com, we started selling a pink patch and a pink patch hat. It was an idea birthed out of Region IV law enforcement officer Andy Collins. And we're doing that again this year. So I hope everyone will go buy either a pink patch or pink patch hat. And Colonel Darren Ryder's been good enough to get hats for his staff. So they will be wearing them starting next week to really promote that for the last part of October. So really excited about that. And last but not least, and I know Susie knows this, but we are on track to meet or beat last year's license sales, just so everybody's aware.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. At this time, I'll recognize Commissioner Jimmy Granberry with the Wildlife and Forestry Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to jump on Bobby's, Director Wilson's comment about the event over in East Tennessee and the picture. It was really great for me to see an event outside of the world of our agency that was with other folks, and how much respect TVA, Georgia Game and Fish, the U.S. Game and Fish have for our agency and what we do. And what, we were at the airport and 5 guys get off an airplane. They're coming there to fish from out of state for 5 days, and it's just on and on and on. And so it was a really great thing to see the fruits of our labor, and we really appreciate it. Because we're doing TWRA events, we're not doing joint events. So it was really fun to see how much respect everybody had for our agency. So this time I'll call on Roger Shields to give us a turkey update. Roger, we thank you and your team for all your hard work, and I know you're under the microscope because turkeys are very important to the state of Tennessee, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Granberry. Well, good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. It's great to be here. I was thinking as I was sitting here waiting that I think about the second commission meeting I was able to attend was at this very facility here at Lone Oaks. And it's a really great facility. It's neat. And I was looking around, and for those who can't see who are, tuning in or whatever, there are displays of kind of historic woodworking tools on all the walls that surround this sale barn. And I thought, it's kind of appropriate because today I'm going to tell you a little bit about a new tool that the turkey program, and actually the deer program too, are using to get some more and better information surrounding harvest. So about 2 years ago, we started conducting a postseason hunter survey to get information, as I said, about harvest for both deer and turkeys. They're not combined, but separately. And, the turkey program has had a focus of late on trying to improve the data collection we do for monitoring purposes. We do a lot of things in the program, a lot of research, a lot of surveys and monitoring stuff, but we're trying to get better information so we can improve and make better decisions or recommendations for you to make those decisions on. So like I said, a couple years ago, we started contracting with University of Tennessee to conduct these surveys. And if we want to understand really what's going on with populations, we have to have good, reliable information, data that's helping us to understand those populations. And so I'm excited about this new tool, like I said, this survey. And today I'm going to share some of the preliminary results from the 2021 spring turkey survey that was conducted. So historically, TWRA has used total harvest as an index to population numbers. And we relied on self-reported harvest from the hunters to tell us what that total harvest was. There's two main problems with using total harvest in this way. First of all, science has shown that reported harvest is often inaccurate. It doesn't accurately reflect the true total harvest. Often it's underreported. The problem is you don't know how much it's underreported. So you're kind of at the whim of the hunters to report those things. Also, when you get a number like that, there's no confidence surrounding that number. So you don't know how close or far you are from the actual number. There's no confidence interval associated with that. The other big problem is that it doesn't incorporate any measure of hunter participation or hunting effort. And so you can't calculate a harvest rate, if you will, or a catch per unit effort or a harvest per unit effort. And so science has also shown that if you can incorporate effort into your estimates, that better tracks your turkey population or the population you're interested in. To kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about there, consider for a moment that the two hunting seasons that occurred in 2018 and 2020. So in 2018, the reported harvest for the first time in the past 15 years dipped below 30,000 birds. 2 years later in 2020, we had our record harvest ever recorded in Tennessee, topping out over 40,000. Now, if harvest by itself is supposed to index populations, that would suggest that our turkey population went from the lowest level in 15 years to the highest ever. And I don't think anybody believes that happened, not in a 2-year period. But we recognize that hunting effort played a role in that. The problem is if you don't measure it, you don't know what degree that hunting effort played. So the main purpose of, there you go, those little arrows I forgot to click. The main purpose of this survey then is to try and obtain reliable estimates of harvest, but also hunter participation and hunting effort, as well as a harvest rate for both statewide as well as by administrative region. By using a statistically viable sample of hunters, a representative sample of those hunters, we can get accurate estimates of harvest, but also of these other metrics that we're interested in, participation and effort. and to have confidence intervals associated with those measures so we can have a way of assessing how accurate we actually are becoming. The importance of the confidence intervals, like I said, is basically tells you how good your estimate is. It gives you a range, an upper level and a lower level, that if you were to survey or to get information from every hunter and measure that aspect that you're interested in, the true level, true value, the true number would fall somewhere in that range of your upper and lower confidence interval. So that's really important to kind of be able to have an idea of how accurate we're becoming with our estimates. Another benefit of the survey is that it ensures anonymity of the respondents. And so that encourages and bolsters accurate reporting and honest reporting. And then a second objective of the hunter surveys are to capture information or obtain information about hunter opinion, hunter satisfaction, that we also then can use as we're trying to develop our management recommendations and to try and improve management across the state. So we've conducted 2 surveys, excuse me. We have conducted 2 surveys so far, and based on the just over or almost 5,200 responses from this past spring survey, we estimated, again, about, well, over 91,000 hunters who harvested about 53,700 turkeys. But it's interesting that we also discovered that nearly 2,200 or 7,200 additional birds were shot but not recovered. Some of those may have survived. Many of those probably died afterwards. We learned that the average hunter, adult hunter, spent about 9.5 days afield during the spring season, and youth about half that, about 4.5 days per youth. But the harvest, again, that harvest per unit effort came out to be 0.14 birds per day for adult hunters, or you can think of that as 14 birds per 100 day of hunting effort. And then it was a little better actually for the youth hunters at 0.20 or 20 birds per 100 days of hunting effort. And overall, about 60% of the hunters were satisfied or very satisfied with their spring hunting experience, whereas about 28 were dissatisfied or very dissatisfied with their hunting. Now, all of those metrics would have confidence intervals associated with them, but for simplicity, I've left those off of this slide. Wanted to just compare the information we're getting from the hunter survey, compare it to information we get from the self-reported harvest. So on the left in the blue bars is what was reported to us in 2020 and 2021. And then on the right, there are the estimates that we obtained for total harvest from the survey. And again, you can see the little confidence interval bars at the top of the green bars. So I think one thing that jumps out at you is, as I was mentioning before, the self-reported numbers are quite a bit lower than the estimate from the survey. And we actually find that that's fairly common. Research done in Kentucky and the work being done in Georgia, they're finding very similar rates, that their reported harvest is about 30% below their survey estimates that they generate. But the thing I really wanted you to see is just the consistency of the trend, if you will. The harvest appeared to drop from 2020 to 2021. And I shared some information with you after the spring season based on total harvest, reported harvest, that seemed to be the case. That number had dropped a little bit from the high in 2020. But now I want to delve a little bit into the results that we actually can get from the survey itself, the hunter effort and harvest survey. So what we have, comparing 2020 to 2021, the estimate itself is in the orange shaded column, and then the associated confidence intervals are in the unshaded columns. But what I want you to note first is that the number of hunters actually increased in 2021 over 2020. And that was also reflected in the sale of licenses, as Jennifer was pointing out, that this year's looking to be higher than last year. But through the end of the spring turkey season, more licenses sold that included the hunting privileges in 2021 than were sold in 2020. The interesting thing, though, is that those hunters spent less days actually out hunting this past year than they did in 2020. In fact, on average, we estimated that the average, and this again is for just adult hunters, is for demonstration, but the average adult hunter spent almost 3/4 of a day less this past spring than they did in 2020. The similar findings for those youth hunters may be a little bit even more dramatic. I guess some of those kids actually had to go to school this year, whereas last year they didn't. And so as we pointed out, again, total harvest appears to have dropped slightly between 2020 and 2021. But what's interesting, even though harvest had dropped, when you look at that harvest rate, the turkeys per man day or turkeys per day, it actually improved. And so the season in terms of hunter success or the hunter success, harvest success actually was better in 2021 than it was in 2020. So again, thinking of that as like 12 turkeys per 100 days in 2020, it increased to 14 birds per 100 days in 2021. And that difference is actually significant. I also want to just share a little bit of information about the different regions and kind of how those broke down this past spring. Region 2, both in terms of number of hunters and total harvest, was tops again, as it usually is, had the highest numbers. But also the harvest rate turned out to be the highest in Region 2 as well. It was lowest in Region 1 and then kind of intermediate there in Region 3 and 4. And just for interest's sake, I found it a little bit interesting. The percentage of the gobbler harvest that was comprised of jakes increased as you went from Region 1 to Region 4, starting around 5% of the harvest was jakes up to 12.7 for Region 4. And commissioners, just to conclude, again, I just want to re-emphasize that, well-designed, rigorous surveys like are being conducted, if they're conducted well, are a powerful tool to getting us additional essential information about the hunting season. From the survey that we conducted, which incorporates the hunting effort and participation, we discovered that the 2021 season was actually more successful in terms of harvest than it was in 2020, the record COVID year. The other thing that is key about it is that it includes a measure of confidence, so we can measure that. We have that understanding now of the how accurate we are or how good our estimates are. And just in general, the information we get from the survey really complements the data that we get from the reported harvest. It's not to say that reported harvest is not useful. It's actually very useful because it provides us information that we could not get, that would be difficult to get using a survey approach. Things like the timing of harvest, by week of the season or even by day of the season, or the timing of multiple harvests by the same individual hunter. So pairing these two sources of data is great, and I'm excited to have this new tool in our toolbox. And with that, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Roger. I'm going to start on my left with Commissioner McLaren and just work down the row and try to keep some order in the questions. So, Brian, if you have any questions, I'll let you go first.
So with your surveys, you're pulling random hunters in, and I know statistics is a very complicated subject, but how do you compare? Do you know you're getting the same type of hunter year in and year out, or
Right.
How do you know you're getting a good sampling of our hunting public?
Okay. So we actually stratify the different license types, and we pull a random sample for the different strata. So we have those who have annual license types. We have those who have permanent license types, like the 65 and older. We have the lifetime license types. So we pull random samples from those different license types and then send those surveys out and do some math behind the scenes when we get the results back. So we're trying to get a representative sample of all the different types of hunters that are there.
Do you have the ability to go back a couple of slides? I just want to see the regional. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
That was just Jake. So it's total harvest. Not a lot of difference between regions other than Jake. Okay. Second question is, it looks like there's around a 30 to 40% delta between what's reported and what we actually think is managing from what's reported? Are we managing from what we think's actually harvested, or does it matter as long as we're consistent?
I think that what you just ended with, as long as we're consistent, because this underreporting had probably been going on from the very beginning, right? We weren't aware of it, and we have no reason to believe that it's maybe increased or decreased. So we feel like we're just being consistent.
But we can quantify it. And I think you mentioned that in other states that do similar surveying with confidence levels, they believe their underreporting is about exactly what we're experiencing.
Correct.
Okay. So they're no more law abiding than Tennesseans.
Well, I don't want it to sound like that it's all just because people are trying to evade the law. I think a lot of reasons come up as to why people don't report. We forget, we get busy, whatever. Things happen. So.
So you have the harvest rates. Do you have any poult rates to show us?
I was wondering if anybody would ask about that. I'm still working on all the results from the summer survey. I can tell you though that it was a better year this year in general, much better than last year. Yeah, sorry, the numbers are starting to all blur together, but yeah, about 60% of the hens actually had poults this year versus 40% last year. And the overall statewide total was about 2.2 poults per hen for the state as a whole.
Roger, back up one slide to the harvest that Commissioner Wright was speaking to, the delta from the reported to the actual from the survey. Seems like a much higher delta. I think to get from 32 to 53 is it's like 50%, isn't it? Or greater than 50%.
Well, it was about 40%,
Okay.
41, 39%, sorry, 39%.
Okay.
And that's another problem with the reporting is that it's not even consistent from year to year. So it's hard to really know what's happening when you use just reported harvest.
Okay, well, I'll let some other.
Has there been any consideration given to Region 2 success as far as habitat versus the other 3 regions? Why do we continue to see?
Well, the habitat matrix, if you will, in Region 2 is about as prime as you can get for turkeys. If you think about what produces good turkey habitat, it's that mixture of woods and openings and pastures and timber. And Region 2 has that great, the closer you can get to almost a 50-50 mix is where you have the best turkey habitat, highest densities of turkeys. And so that's where we're at.
Yeah.
If you go either direction, you end up with too much of one or the other.
And so my observation this year as far as poults is most of our hens have 8 to 10 poults in our area, in which unfortunately I'm in Murray County, and that's the best county in the state. And so that's where all the hunters come to kill turkeys. So it looks like we're going to have plenty of turkeys next spring for them to kill. So it's significantly better than it has been the last couple of years.
I believe so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Roger, we're all seeing a lot more poults this spring, and as your observation is that the numbers seem to be up, and anecdotally, of course, just what in terms of we're seeing many more. Do you have any idea as to what would have caused that this year, or to what it would be attributable? Has the weather, for instance, been different during the hatch time? Or
well, I could procrastinate. What's the word I'm looking for? I could kind of make some guesses. Yeah, but I don't know. It's just the way the turkeys are. They have boom and bust years, and that's just their natural cycle. You'll have several years of busts, and then all of a sudden the stars align, everything works great, and you just have this flourish of new recruits, if you will, into the population. And that's what helps the populations to thrive long term. but you never see a stable population because they're constantly going up and down with the results of the season and reproduction. If we were a little further north, I might say that the cicada hatch had something to do with it, because I know areas in Kentucky and Ohio are saying, they had that 13-year cicada hatch this past year, and that may have influenced, because they were also seeing really good poult production this year, but it didn't really affect much of Tennessee, mostly just over kind of like in Region 3. So I can't attribute that to what we saw across the state.
In Wisconsin and Michigan, some of these areas where there's a lot of grouse hunting, I've been told that the grouse numbers will be cyclical and be down, and the predator numbers are up, like avian predators are up. And then after a while, there's not enough food for the avian predators, and then it goes the other way. Do you think predation is a factor?
It could have a factor, just as you were describing. Yeah. It's so complex, the interactions with habitat, weather, predation, all of it. And that's why I said just every once in a while, the stars align, everything works out. You don't have flooding rains right in the middle of, the hatches where you got young poults on the ground. You don't have as many predators on the landscape. All of it aligns in that one year, and you just have a boom year.
Okay, thank you.
Roger, thank you so much for the presentation and the detailed work. It helps a lot to see these numbers. My main question was about the poult to hen ratio, so that was answered, and I'm glad that's up. Do you see anything as far as the numbers, the harvest numbers? I know we talked about maybe looking forward to different regions as far as seasons. Does this help you as far as just look forward to or looking towards that, maybe still dividing those regions in different settings, season
Right.
setting?
As I shared last time, I was at a commission meeting, talked about we're working on trying to develop some turkey management units, and we're still in the process of doing that. We're as a turkey team, we've kind of got comfortable with a couple of options, and we want to start kind of sharing that out and getting other feedback on that. So we're hoping that by next spring, maybe we'll have something to share.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Yeah, one of the things I learned at this Southeastern Conference is, we always say we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think there's so many states dealing with exactly what we're dealing with now. The state of Missouri has got some counties that are booming with their harvest rates, and some counties that are drastically declining. And I learned in so many different presentations, there are so many different things that affect our turkey population. From the nesting to the predators to the poult ratio production to the just adult mortality rate. I think that's good networking with these different agencies and just seeing what they do. I'm really interested in seeing what the UT study, when that's completed, comes out, and we can get our hands on that data. Will we have that data? And if we ever do go to like Vice Chairman said, a regional design of like we do our deer, put something to work to that effect. If we ever decided to go to that, will we have that data from UT in time to make that change? Not this coming season, but by the next season?
Well, the results from the original UT project should be, as I was mentioned earlier, the graduate students working on the dissertation right now. All the data has been collected for the original portion, which is the population modeling and all of that. And we should have some kind of information by next spring, probably late spring,
we'll
early
have it
summer.
in plenty of time to make some changes, not this coming season,
Yes,
but obviously prior to the next season,
for sure.
I guess, right?
For sure.
Yeah, that's what I would love to see. Just because, like we're talking about a 39% increase of harvest that we were not really accounting for. And if we've got some other declines that are affecting some counties, I'd rather be on our toes than on our heels on it. You got your hands full, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Where the survey was,
I'm
had
sorry.
all four regions on it.
Oh, forward.
Right there. Myself and Tommy and Chairman Ripley all live in Region 4, and I don't ever, oh yeah, one more, yeah. And I don't know, I don't ever shoot and whatnot, but I just noticed that number is a little high, and I didn't know if anybody on the commission could explain why that number would be high in Region 4.
Roger, I don't imagine there's any explanation for that. Let's move on.
Somebody need some glasses.
Real quick, I just want to, I want to brag on everyone in wildlife that the quality of the data that's been turned out in this last year, from data like this to data that's the project that we're working on with Cornell on the predictive modeling with deer. That is all the kind of good data that we need to make decisions going into the next round of season setting. And I just want to, my hat's off to everybody in wildlife that's creating this data. It's really good.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you to all of you for supporting the request for approval to do that.
Yep. Yep. Would you go back to the first slide, Roger? Please.
Take me a while, but I'll get there.
Maybe I missed something, but
This one?
no, the fair first, keep going. The one where you projected 97,000 hunters killed, 50 something thousand
Oh, I went
birds.
past it. Sorry.
And you had 50, how many surveys were, all right, hold it. All right, 5,198 responses with 31% response rate. How do you get 91,000 hunters out of that, harvested 54,000 turkeys? And then the slides and after that, none of the numbers add up to either one of those hunters or turkeys.
Right.
So explain that to somebody who's ignorant about statistics. How do you?
No, it's not that. Sorry. I didn't do a very good job explaining, but this was for just the adult hunters. The slide before is total harvest of both adults, youth, everything combined. And when I started delving into it here, I was just showing results for just the adult hunters.
Or how do you get 97,000 hunters out of 5,100 and it's 31% response rate? I don't understand how you
So it's just
figure
like political polling type information. So we know how many different individuals had a particular license type, and we sample a proportion of those, and then we take that number that we get, say maybe we had 1,000 hunters that had, of the responses, 1,000 of those were annual license holders. We know how many annual license holders are, so we can extrapolate that out to the total number of annual license holders and come up with how many of them participated in the season. They may have bought the license, but they didn't actually go and hunt. So we know how many actually went and hunted, how many days they spent hunting on average, and then how many birds they harvested.
And I guess if you use the same model and it's consistent year after year after year, it doesn't matter if you've got 91,000 or 20,000. I mean, you come up with the same percentages of success and that kind of thing. The biggest concern of mine is we've got 54,000 turkeys killed and only 40,000 tagged. So that's ridiculous. I mean, how do we fix that? And how do you get, if you're saying that the hunters that kill turkeys admitted I killed 3 turkeys this year, but I didn't check but 1.
Well, again, we don't know who did what because it's all anonymous. We don't have that information. We just know that based on the responses we get, that this is how many they said they harvested.
Based on the model.
Correct.
We're 40% under, even though we have a tagging system.
Correct.
So
Well,
your
30 to 40%.
confidence in the tagging system is basically 0.
well, I don't know if it's zero. Again, it's useful information. I do appreciate having that information because again, it helps us to see, trends in timing of harvest and other information that we couldn't get as easily through a survey approach. And, as we start talking about what impact changes in the timing of the season or shortening a season or lengthening a season might have, we can kind of look at, well, how did that affect the timing of harvest during the season, that last week or the first week? How many birds were hunters' second harvest in that first 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever? That's the type of information that the reported harvest can tell us. And I think it's useful in that regard.
Well, we've either got a bigger problem than we ever anticipated about people not tagging turkeys, or the model is just completely way off. It can't be, well, there's a problem somewhere. We've got half the people not tagging turkeys, or the model's overestimating the number of turkeys that were killed.
And to some extent, maybe the model does estimate high, but again, the idea that we have a problem in Tennessee, I don't think it's just limited to Tennessee. Again, research has shown that when you depend on reporting harvest, it's always underestimated. And that's whether it's deer, turkey, whether it's Michigan, Texas, Tennessee, it's not just a problem here.
And I get that, but 40%, that's a huge
Well, that's 40% less. It's not 40% of the harvest was reported. It's more like 60, 70% of the harvest is reported.
Okay, well, I took the difference between the reported harvest and what the survey harvest was and did the math, and it was 43%. 17,000 higher than 40,000. So whatever that percentage is, it just seems like we don't have a lot of confidence one way or the other. Either our tagging system is not working or the model is overestimating. So it concerns me that we got people killing turkeys that are not tagging or that in the model. So, but I appreciate the work. I'm not trying to beat you up about that. It just seems like we got a problem that's one or the other that is not giving us good data one way or the other. Yeah. That's all. Thanks.
Chairman.
Anybody else? Monty, you have one more question?
Hey, I was just wondering, and that's a very valid point, Commissioner Cox. What do we go with on deer harvest? And is there a national standard, or of unreported, a percentage that we should be adding to the numbers that we have? What do we go on deer when we go on harvest? Well,
So-
what we've got, and probably do we add 30% to it each year, or do we project that? And
I don't know that we're projecting what we're over under reporting, but I know we do use reported harvest for deer, and they're also, for the past 2 years, have conducted the hunter harvest and effort survey. So we have both for deer.
is there a
beginning 2
national
years ago.
consensus on that by state? Do most other states count around 30 or 35% of unreported game?
I'm not really sure what other states
wondering.
with deer programs utilize. I think there's a combination. There's not a lot of consistency from state to state, unfortunately, on a lot of this.
For the reporting of harvest, do we take in consideration the number of hunters that maybe are not computer savvy and don't report, or I'm sure that there's a lot more cell phones that we could encourage people to report. Do we need to increase our advertising or PR to those hunters to get them to understand the importance of reporting, and so that we can accurately project populations and make those opportunities available? Would that be something that we need to look at?
I think we do a pretty good job of trying to make it easy for people to report. We have the app that's super easy for people to do. They don't even have to have cell service at the time if they choose to use that app. There's computer access, and then they can always go to, we have several manned check stations that they can also go to. And our staff, even if they took it to somewhere even that was just on a WMA or something, I'm sure our staff would help them get it reported. So we try to make it easy for folks. I can't address why not everybody reports when they're supposed to. Again, I don't think it's always, they have the ulterior motives. They just are sometimes forgetful.
But I don't think that we're encouraging their hunters to report from a standpoint of just, you got to report your bird rather than why you need to report the bird.
That's a good point.
I think that we're falling short a little bit on the education and the importance of reporting for their benefit, not just because we want you to report so we can try to catch you if you don't report. I think we need to have a different approach to that and see maybe if we change that, maybe next year to see if there's any more static numbers that come in compared to what we have now versus the actual versus the projected.
Good point.
Commissioner McLaren?
Have you considered like a end of season survey? I know when we dove hunt in Kentucky, the next year before we can buy a license again, we have to report through a questionnaire how many birds we had taken the year before with like migratory birds like dove, for instance. Would that be something we could use to help get the total accurate number?
We could, but actually those types of information those surveys that are done the year after, actually you don't have very good results as well. You have recall bias, or where it's hard for a person to remember a year ago what they did. I can't remember sometimes what I did last week. And to ask a person to remember how many birds, how many days, all that type of information a year after, we could do it, but I don't think we'd get any better results than what we're currently doing with our season or post-season survey that I just presented on.
Well, and we would lose the anonymity that may create honesty, right?
That too.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Roger, thank you so much for all this information. Thank you, the rest of the commission, for
Thank
all
you.
your great questions. And we know this information and further information is going to be very useful come season setting time next May when we get into that. And I think the chairman now says we're going to take a 10-minute break.
Seats, please. We'll resume. Chairman Granberry.
Thank you, Chairman. This time I'd like to call Jason Maxedon up to the podium to give us an update on the duck line and brushing construction. And first, I'd like to compliment Jason and his team. They've been working day and night, literally, to get this done. And Jason will give us an update. And as of about an hour ago, I think that number's gone up on the first season of the Tier 2 blinds. You know, we'll have 3 seasons in the Tier 2 blinds this year. We've got over 5,000 applications, which is just phenomenal. And I guess it's obviously a testament to the fact that we're offering something to the sportsmen of Tennessee that we've never had before. And I will apply, and hopefully maybe we'll get lucky enough to draw a blind and hire a guide in that local area and stay in a local restaurant and get Wally to cook me lunch at his cafe. And so, Jason, if you'd give us an update, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman Granberry, and good afternoon, members of the commission. I'm going to give you a progress update on our Tier 2 duck blinds. As you all know, we presented to you 2 months ago at the commission meeting in regards to the Tier 2 duck blinds, but there's 42 total of those. 28 of those blinds are being built this season. 14 of those will be replaced next year in the 2022 season. I want to talk about those 14 first. So those were structures that were already present in the original Tier 1 system. Those are wooden structures that were built last year. We retained these because of the shape that they were in. Our staff have gone in and scabbed onto those, basically just replacing floors and walls to make those safe to hunt out of. All of those are complete, and all of those have been brushed except for one. There is one lacking, and that's on Old Hickory in Region 2, and it will be brushed week after next. We just ran out of brush on that particular site, or the vendor did. So that leads me into the 28 Tier 2 blinds that are going in this year. And as I told you 2 months ago, we were doing that in phases. We called Phase 1, and Phase 1 was going to be where we get the metal structures and the platforms out on site. Phase 2 was going to be the amenities, and Phase 3 is the brushing project. So I'll talk about each one of those. You also recall at that meeting, I told you that we would have that completed, that our vendor would by October the 1st. That is not going to happen. That vendor is behind. They had significant damage to a couple of their boats. They suffered a head-on collision with one of their vehicles at Reelfoot. And like every other vendor across the country, they're just behind on manpower. So the deadline was not met, and per that contract, liquidated damages have begun, and those began on October the 1st. The good news is the project is going to be completed. The contractor crews with the vendor are continuing to work daily now. I'll show you a progress report here in just a second. We mobilized our own staff. We promised you that we would have these completed by duck season, and we will do that. So we mobilized some of our own staff to assist with this effort. And again, I'm going to show you a map here, or a graph in a minute, to show you how we've got those done. The blinds will be built, and they will be ready by duck season. So here they are by area. This will be interesting, I think, to some of the members of our public. And basically, just to break this down, if it's got a green check, that means that it's completed. So on Barkley 8, I won't go through all of them, but I'll just describe them. On Barkley blind 8, or site 8, it will be completed October the 29th. That blind is in the construction phase. It's about 75% done today, but I just didn't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So we know that it will be completed by the end of next week. The green check on Barkley 9 means that that has been completed, and the brushing will be completed by November 15th, and so on down the graph. But you can see all of them at Gooch are totally complete. That means all blinds have been built and brushed. And then if you go over on the right-hand side on Tigert, Tigert's completed. I'll actually show you a video of Tigert here in just a second to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. These are the Region 2 blinds. Everything has been started at Region 2. AEDC, as you see, will be completed by this Friday. Cheatham is the only one that we really haven't done much work to the blinds on. All the blinds are on site. We just haven't put the walls and the roof structures up. That project will begin next Monday to start getting all those erected and put up at Cheatham. So I did want to go through and show you, I think 2 months ago, we were able to show you some configurations, but I wanted to show you a few pictures and talk about how some of the blinds differ. We've got a couple of different configurations. This is what we would consider a shallow water depth, but this blind's actually about 3 or 4 feet of water depth underneath it. That's going to be the boat shed in the back. This is one of the taller blinds. That's at Camden 107. The water depth will get to about 10 feet. So you can see the platform is pretty high up in the air there. And then we have floating blinds. So on areas like Gooch WMA, Reelfoot WMA, and Camden, in fact, the one in the top right-hand corner is Gooch. We'll show you that structure completed in a second. The one on the bottom left-hand side is at West Sandy. There's floaters there as well. So just kind of take you through what the stages are, what that looks like to get phase one done. This is what that blind looks like with metal on it. Dog ramp on the left. Of course, you can see the shooting ports there in the front and then the floating docks that are underneath. This is what the interior looks like. On the left-hand side, that's looking down the shooting platform. In the back, that's sort of the kitchen area. There'll also be rubber kind of hanging down to hold the heat in. There's benches in the back and then a tabletop at the end for cooking. The black thing that you see at the far end of the shooting area, that's a sliding door for your dog. Your dog will be on the other side of that, and you can open the door to let the dog in and out or to take the duck from the dog. This is that Gooch blind completed. You can see the brushing is complete on this one, and then you can actually see it's already flooded at Gooch. We start pumping operations there early, so this blind's ready to go. This is on Reelfoot Lake. This is Chase Taylor. I'll kind of just let it roll, maybe narrate a little bit through the blinds as they were going through the construction phase. These blinds were taken out there. The posts were driven in to refusal. They have an air-powered driver. Our vendor did. They drove the post down in there. Some of the different configurations on the blinds have shooting decks. If you look before that piece of metal's on, you can kind of see a wood structure from the end that's got aluminum on top. This is a step-up deck. This is where you can shoot over the back of these blinds. Some of these blinds have these in the front. The ones that allow you to shoot over the back, again, that's a step-up platform that's in there. It's one of the other amenities. These are the phase two things that we were talking about. So some of the phase twos are already being implemented as well. This is one of our contract vendors actually brushing the blind there. This one just shows the phases as it go through. The vendor built this dock in the middle to be able to haul their parts out there on, so they would float their generator and their tools and the roof's metal on, and then they would just pull it in to be able to work off of that dock structure. Going to Tigard here, and this is blind to A4, or he'll be headed to blind A4. This was one of the 14 that was brushed, that was already a good structure that we left in place, and you can see the brushing is completed on it.
We chose to replace A4 first this year. It's the furthest one from the boat ramp and the most difficult one to get to. Just waiting on duck season now. We're good to go.
All right, and just a few more. Just really, this slide just wanted to show you some of the differences and what they look like in some of the areas. Also, we're going to have signs on these so that the hunters, as they pull up, will know that these are a tier 2 site. It's going to show the blind number, have a QR code that you can scan that will give you the shooting hours, all the hunting regulations that are associated with those WMAs. And then it also says no blind hopping allowed in these tier 2 sites. Again, I just wanted to go back over the tier 2 and 3 application periods. Chairman Granberry mentioned beginning, as of today, we've had about 5,055 that have applied already for the early season draw. And you'll see that it closes on the 26th. And you can see the dates, the mid-season and the late season, and the dates that those will open and close, and when the notice of intent is due. Be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thanks, Jason. That was a wonderful presentation and a lot of hard work. I know you've been right in there with them, so I really appreciate it. We'll start. Chairman Cox, did you have any questions? We'll start that on your end.
I guess the only question I have, where did you get the dates to be completed by? Did that have something to do with the watering schedule, or did you just pick a day?
It did. We wanted to allow ourselves some time, Commissioner Cox, to try if something like this came up. So we actually picked October the 1st to give to the vendor. We did that for two reasons. One, to give us a little bit of allowable time if something went wrong like this, and also the flooding schedule. We generally don't start flooding most of the areas until the end of October, with the exception of Gooch. It's one of our early flooding areas.
Yeah, and the way I understand it, they had some issues with COVID and had a bad accident or something like that. And I just wondered, because I think you're doing great. As long as we get the blinds in, it's really good. And to have the project this size, I think I appreciate what you're doing. You're doing a good job.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I just second what Commissioner Cox said. I mean, I'm a subcontractor as well that works with a lot of government contracts, and who would have known that we would have had all these supply chain issues, and every contract you have has a COVID disclaimer or COVID policy that you have to adopt because of potential supply chain issues and labor shortages and that kind of thing. And I think it's a tremendous job that you and the whole TWRA team is accomplishing out there in the field under some pretty duress circumstances, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.
I'd just like to say I've been in contact with, give a shout out to Brad Wheat that works for us, and Brad is on top of it in our area. I talked to him just this week about some flooding. They're rolling with Big Sandy and Gin Creek now and working on Springville. Going to levy or open the gates up the 24th, I think, this month. And anyway, just shout out to Brad. He's doing a great job, and you are as well. Thank you.
I just want to give a big shout out to you for all the hard work you've done. I don't know if you're sleeping or not, but I appreciate it. I know you're doing fantastic on this, and I appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I want to join Vice Chairman in that. I know that you personally have just worked night and day on this, and the work that we're seeing, the way these blinds have turned out is amazing. I'll put in too, because I'd like to hunt out of that kind of a blind. That's a beautiful product that we've got. And Jason, you're to be commended, and we appreciate your hard work.
Mr. Woods? Yeah, kudos, all of that and more. Had a lot of hoops to jump through, a lot of obstacles to overcome, and we're going to make it, and we appreciate that.
I know Tiffany will be glad when all this gets done, so you can go back to sleep. So you can sleep without having to worry about what's going on.
As a duck hunter, and seeing the blind and the brush jobs are first class. Good job.
Just to add to what they said, pile on a bit, I'm just really pleased with the work product, but I'm also really excited about the increased opportunity this gives to the average person who can't hunt 60 days because of their work schedule and supporting a family, et cetera. So really excited about that. But I wanted to ask one question, and I think I know the answer, but with the liquidated damage, I know we're mobilizing some TWRA personnel to help make sure we get this done for the stakeholders and duck hunters of the state, but we don't really have any incremental increased cost in getting these done, and because we're using our own staff, and with liquidated damages, we may actually come out ahead. So good job on a good contract. I know it's probably required with state contracts, but good job managing the process.
Great point. Thank you, sir.
And then the last thing is, so that, it's good to report to the public. We don't have any incremental increased cost with this, but the last thing was about pumping schedules. Those are pretty much on schedule regardless. We don't pump before November anyway, do we?
Yeah, Gooch is the only area. We're starting pumping operations on a couple in Region 2 now, but typically at the end of October, we'll start pumping operations for the waterfowl units. We do start earlier for like our shorebird units. We're on schedule. Yes, sir. Everything's on schedule. They're pumping operations.
Well, Jason, thank you. And I don't see any further questions. And now that we got the blinds and Jennifer's got the draw and the computer stuff figured out, we're going to charge Director Wilson with getting some ducks down here from Canada. So can you call Duck Dave up in Canada and get some ducks shipped down here for us?
I'll put in that call tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman, can I give a shout out to our staff? Because a lot of you thank me, but I want to thank our staff. They're the ones that got all of this done. They're continuing to do it. They're putting in a lot of long hours, and we've got all divisions across the agency, not just the wildlife division, but multiple divisions working hard on this to get it done. So very thankful for a great staff doing that work.
Great point, Jason. And I think we all know that the staff is a great staff, and you're the great leader that's making this happen, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, that ends the Wildlife Committee report.
All right, thank you, Chairman. This time I'll recognize Kent Woods, Chairman of the Fisheries Committee. He's the Chairman of the Fisheries Committee because he knows nothing about turkey hunting. Mr. Woods.
Right back at you. At this time, I'd like to call Frank Fish for a couple of proclamations he wants to present us.
All right. Good afternoon, commissioners. So we're at, I've got two proclamations for you to consider and vote on during this commission meeting. First one's Proclamation 2107. This is the sport fish proclamation. The timeline on this is that we're at the last step here, but just to remind everyone that we previewed these recommendations in August. We had a month-long or almost a month public comment period where we received only 3 comments, and none of them pertained to any of the recommendations we had. So we feel like we didn't, we should comfortable to move forward with what we had in the majority. And now it's time to present them one final time for your consideration. So the first one is on Barkley Reservoir. We want to reduce the crappie limit from 30 to 20. The reason we want to do this is we want to bring it in line with the regulation on Kentucky and Barkley Lakes in the state of Kentucky. At the same time, we would like to reduce the smallmouth bass size limit to 15 to match our Kentucky Lake and the state of Kentucky smallmouth limits. So that should be pretty simple. We've got over 90% approval of lowering the crappie limit on Barkley Lake. It's a very minor smallmouth bass fishery on that water body. We don't expect any issues with changing that. Over in East Tennessee on the South Holston Reservoir, currently we have a 15 spotted bass per day limit, but because of the introduction of Alabama bass, which are a really problematic invasive species in the Southeast, the state of Virginia has basically put taken all their limits off their major reservoirs for spotted bass to try to limit the movement of Alabama bass in their waters. So they're asking, because they share management on that reservoir, if we would do the same. We don't have any problem doing it. We already had a really liberal creel for spotted bass. So this will put us in line for our reciprocal agreement with Virginia. So, and again, the goal is just to remove Alabama bass as needed. We have not encountered any on South Holston Reservoir yet. This is a preventative measure. Okay, over to Chilhowie and Parksville reservoirs. Currently, there's no limit on yellow perch, but this fishery is growing in popularity. It makes up about 26% of the effort on Chilhowie Lake, which is phenomenal considering nobody was fishing for these 10 years ago. We've talked to the anglers. They're concerned about seeing too many fish come out. Our biologists are concerned because they don't really know what's next for those fisheries. And we asked the anglers on Chilhowie what they thought, and we had 85% support for putting some kind of a limit on it. So we're recommending a yellow perch daily limit of 15 per day with no size restrictions. On to our TWRA fishing lakes. At Laurel Hill Lake, we want to reduce the bass creel limit from 10 to 5 and keep the existing protected length ranges. On Maples Creek and Whiteville Lake, we have a crowding of bass and crappie problem. So we want to remove the creel limit on bass, except you can only keep 1 over 18. So in other words, weed out the small ones and remove the creel and the existing 8-inch size limit on crappie. On Browns Creek and Glens Creek or Glen Springs, we want to remove the creel and 8-inch minimum length limit on crappie. we're working with our state parks across the state, and on the Cumberland Mountain and Standing Stone State Park lakes, we're recommending that we remove the 15-inch minimum length limit on bass, which should improve the bass fishery there. And we want to establish a 20 fish per day creel limit on bluegill and red ear sunfish on the lakes at Standing Stone, Cumberland Mountain, and Pickett State Parks. The community fishing program is a relatively new program within the agency. It's developed in partnership with our Outreach and Communications Division, where we're identifying places where we want to make it convenient and easy for people to go and re-engage with fishing. So this has grown to this list of 5 only in the last year. And these are small lakes, small ponds in some cases, where we're stocking catfish and rainbow trout. And a lot of times we don't have regulations on these little water bodies, and people can get a little carried away harvesting fish. So we wanted to put at least some regulations on these water bodies so they're not over harvested and more people can share the stocked fish, particularly with the catfish and trout, which come at an expense when we stock those. We also want to add a restriction that only rod reels and handheld lines may be used. Snagging, trot lines, jugs, seines, and cast nets cannot be used. And we are working with our hatcheries and our partners at Fish and Wildlife Service to introduce cutthroat trout into some of our trout tailwaters. We're doing this just to diversify the fisheries, get a little excitement, more excitement about our tailwater fisheries. We're looking at locations like Timms Ford, Center Hill, and Boone dams to stock below, and in the Hiwassee River. So we need some regulation on these fish. Any place we put these, we amended the proclamation to show that their rules would be the same as if they were rainbow trout. We also want to establish some new wild trout streams. Our wild trout streams have a 5 fish per day limit, trout limit, and you're only allowed to fish single hook artificial lures. And we have several of those. We want to add 2 more, Rough Ridge Creek and Little Stony Creek, which are 2 brook trout streams that one of them was recently restored and the other is just a good fishery we want people to know about. On to our delayed harvest areas. These are areas where we have a fall, winter catch and release season, and you're only allowed to fish with artificial lures. We stock trout, but we don't have to put as many in as we would if we were engaged in a harvest fishery. And then harvest is allowed at the end of the delayed harvest, so the fish aren't wasted and people can use those fish. So we want to add 1 new location, which is Big Soddy Creek in Hamilton County. The season would be October 1st through the last day of February, which is pretty typical for our program. And we have one already on the Doe River, and we want to change the season of that to reflect October 1 through the last day of February. It's currently November 1st. We think we can get another month out of that season. In the city of Gatlinburg, they have a few waters that are designated for kids fishing, and they've asked our help in changing the proclamation to put new boundaries on the West Prong Little Pigeon River section. So currently, the boundaries are 100 yards above the entrance to the Holt Park to the downstream to the Gatlinburg bypass, and they're asking us to change it to be from the North Park Lane downstream to the Gatlinburg bypass. And we've got a map here. It just shows these are large structures that are, you can't miss them. So they've got a really nice park there to host kids that are fishing in that bend of the river there. Okay, in Middle Tennessee, we have currently regulations that prohibit gigging of fish. This dates back 50 years plus to when there was a lot more people interested in harvesting red horses and suckers. And I guess there was that much concern that they shut down gigging in that part of the state. We don't really have those fishery. The people aren't interested in those fish in that way anymore. And this is the only part of the state where you're not allowed to gig. So in those counties where we're not allowed to do it, we're saying we may as well just let people do it there. We don't think there'll be a lot of people engaging in it, but right now we have this paragraph in the fishing guide that raises more questions than it helps fisheries. So we want to remove that old restriction. Now, shift gears over to the Tellico River. This is one area that has changed since I presented this in August. Tellico River area hosts a lot of great fishing. We've got a Tellico River, Citico Creek, the Green Cove Pond. We have a permit that's required to fish up there. We promoted the late harvest area in those waters. And there's wild trout fisheries in the streams that feed the Tellico River. And as I mentioned, the issue at hand was that at Bald River Falls, there's a bridge that is in need of some work on some schedule that the U.S. Forest Service is managing that project and to do that. And in August, we thought we were going to have to adjust our stocking perhaps and accommodate some road closures and things. And what we've learned since August is that the Forest Service cannot predict when the work's going to happen. We don't think they have the funding to do what they need to do. We've got no indication that it's going to happen anytime soon. So what we're recommending at this time is to continue stocking trout as we normally would and continue requiring the permit on Tellico and Citico Creeks. So there's no need to change any of that now. And also we did talk to we had additional conversation with locals that they're in that valley of Tellico, and we learned about some concern that if we take a permit off that, it'll devalue the perception of the value of that river. So anyway, we don't have any reason to mess with it. We're not recommending any changes to the requirements for Tellico and Citico Creek. Now, Green Cove Pond is different. Green Cove Pond is a TWRA-owned body of water that we traditionally stock with trout. A permit is typically required from October 1st to August 15, and it's restricted in use to only children, seniors, and those with disabilities. So it does need extensive repairs, and we've already started the project to repair this pond. It's currently drained. You couldn't fish it today if you wanted to. We've stopped selling well, people are well aware in the valley that they shouldn't buy the permit, and the permit's not for sale this time of year anyway, because it's shut down, I believe. I don't know where Susie is to nod her head, but anyway, we've got to do some minor dredging, replace a pier, renovate walkways. We're going to put a trail in around it and really improve the ADA access, even though just to keep the spirit of this being a place for people that might have disabilities to come in and have really good ADA access. And that's what we'd like to do going forward. We want to reopen this as a facility that has a moment of freedom access point in it. And we want to open it to all anglers, eliminate the restrictions for people that aren't young or old, because a lot of older and younger people have people that might be 35 that would help them fish somehow. We know from our R3 activities that family fishing is where it's at, so we want to promote that. We want to stock it with trout, as we always have, and catfish to keep something going in the warmer months of the year, and permanently remove the permit requirement for Green Cove Pond for the future. So to make these changes in the fishing proclamation, we need to remove we would remove the Tellico permit. It's called a Tellico Citico permit, even though it applies to Green Cove Pond, but we want to remove that requirement for Green Cove Pond and remove the age and disability requirements and add a catfish creel limit of 5 fish per day. Okay, shifting gears to harvest of crayfish. You can harvest crayfish in Tennessee to eat them. And currently, you're not allowed to take crayfish from the creeks that are listed here. These are small headwater streams in Wayne and Hardin County. And that was because the Alabama crayfish was a listed species. It is no longer considered a listed species, so there's no reason to have a restriction on use of crayfish in these water bodies. So we already delete those from the sport fish proclamation. With that, I'll take any questions. Commissioner Blue.
Just one quick question. I forgot the name. Was it Maple Creek in Carroll County? Where
Yes.
we were doing something? Is that, I'm not even sure where is that?
That's part of Natchez Trace State Park.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Never mind. I got you. Never mind. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Any more discussion? You don't want to coordinate it first? Do I hear a motion then that we pass this proclamation 21.07?
This is voting in committee only, Fisheries Committee only.
I move approval of Proclamation 2107.
Do I hear a second?
I'll go ahead and second that.
All right.
2107.
Okay, I have a discussion. We open for discussion now. Okay. I've had several people concerned about specifically the Reelfoot area. I think all the new technology anglers and are able to go right to those crappie beds there, and I think they're concerned that they're going to be overfished. They would really be, most of the locals there would like a 10-inch length limit on crappie, just for the Reelfoot area. So I'd like to make the motion to amend Proclamation 2107 with a 10-inch length limit for crappie at Reelfoot.
Your motion is to put a 10-inch size limit
Correct.
on Reelfoot Lake.
Correct.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Get a second. All right. Yeah, we need to vote on the amendment first, and then we'll finalize the proclamation. All right, all in favor?
Wait, hold
a
on. I
minute.
got a question about that.
Oh, yeah, I was fixing to say that.
Excuse me. I don't know whether to ask Commissioner Box or Frank. There's such a history at Reelfoot. Do you think we ought to have a public meeting and make sure that we're not going to have unintended consequences before we change something that may or may not be in a majority? I mean, I don't know. I'll ask Commissioner Box or Frank, either one. If we feel like that's, how many people have you talked to? And there's just such a history up there. I don't know. Frank, maybe you ought to respond to that. I don't know.
I really can't predict how the public will respond because we haven't put it out in front of the public. I mean, that would have been great to have that in the August preview. But we have had this request in the past. We're familiar that there are people that would like to see a size limit on Reelfoot Lake. And we actually evaluated, we put some numbers to that question a couple of years ago when it came up, and we looked at different size limits and what impact we think they would have. And when we look at it, there could be a nominal improvement with a 10-inch size limit, but it's really wouldn't be worth, at the time we felt it wouldn't be worth putting the public through measuring fish just to try to realize that, because it's so marginal that a strong year class of a strong cohort of fish that comes through or a poor year class could upset that. It's a lot of variability in that predictiveness. We don't think it would hurt anything either. So it's really what we would support a 10-inch crappie limit if that's what the public wants, but I can't know what the public wants without asking them. We have options. We could put that in our creel survey over the next during the next fishing year, but I don't get the sense that the commission wants to wait that time.
When is the fishing guide printed?
That process starts in November, starting to get more finalized, and they do print runs in January.
Would you have time between now and the time that's printed to gauge public support for that?
Well, as you saw earlier, these surveys that actually represent the public have to be done in a fairly structured way. Our creel survey does do that, but we conduct that during crappie season, not during November, December. In fact, we don't do a lot of creel on reelfoot in those months. We don't do a lot of angler surveys in those months. So if we were just pick up the phone and call people that might crappie fish, we could wildly incorrectly assess that. We'd rather do it in a structured way. The other thing we could do is put it in and then watch it over time and see how it does. But that doesn't get to your, from a fisheries point of view, we'd be interested in that, but that doesn't, there could still be members of the public that would like to have known about this ahead of time.
Well, I don't have a problem with it. My only concern is the long history of crappie and what's going on up there is, we just don't want to start a fight that's unnecessary. But I think 10 inches is fine, and I'd vote for it. But I just want to make sure that we don't kick a hornet's nest. So that's all I've got.
Well, I'll add to that. I just want to make sure it's the right decision, and I feel like there's been a pretty large group of local support, but I definitely want to do whatever's right. I think it's just a concern for them on the limit, but I'm happy to look at the creel survey and keep an eye on it if they don't think it's.
I mean, if members of the commission have gone and done some homework on this themselves and felt that they've talked to their constituents enough, then you might find comfort in that too.
Well, Angie, obviously, you've had some calls on it. Wally, isn't that in your backyard up there? What? I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, I've asked multiple people, and they're all for it. I've not even had one negative comment yet. The creel clerk, I'm sure you spoke to him. He probably yes or no.
Well,
an opinion. Well, I've asked 20 people in the last 4 or 5 days of all guides of every type. They say the fishing's really good, the fish are there, but every one of them wants a limit. I mean, a length limit. I mean, it was nobody said no length. Some of them said less numbers, but every one of them was far limit because most of them says a 9-inch fish ain't hardly big enough to eat anyway. And they're really catching a lot of fish with these new technologies.
What's the creel limit right now up there?
30.
Yeah.
All right, I got a motion and a second to put a size limit of 10-inch on Reelfoot Lake. At this time, I'm going to ask the Fisheries Committee to, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And I did not give the members of the audience a chance to speak, but does anybody from the audience like to say anything? Good. All right, motion passes.
Now you proceed to your original motion as amended.
Yeah, original motion as amended. Do I hear a first, second?
You've already
Got a second? Monty?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Now, we have another proclamation, Frank.
Yes, we do, Chairman. It'll be Proclamation 2108. And as I mentioned earlier, the crayfish are not only harvested for eating, but they're also harvested for bait. So when we make that change to allow harvest of crayfish in those headwater, small bodies of water in Wayne and Hardin County, we also have to allow it for bait. So we just want to allow these, delete these restrictions from the bait proclamation. So it's a very minor change, but we have to do it in concert with the Sportfish Proclamation. And that concludes the Proclamation 2108.
Anybody got any questions about crawdads? If not, do I hear a motion? Hear a second?
Second.
Got a second, finally. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. All right, Frank, you're done.
Thank you, Chairman.
Just to point out, we went fishing this morning and Director Wilson caught several baits.
All right, if that concludes fisheries, we'll go on to the Budget Committee, and I recognize Chairman Bill Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Churchill, you're up.
Good afternoon. I have a couple of budget expansion requests for the current budget year. First one up there listed is OHV trails on the Ed Carter unit. This is a user code or a budget code for us. It doesn't exist yet. It's pending approval of this, but essentially we've been challenged. The Ed Carter unit, as you may recall, was what was formerly called Tackett Creek unit of the North Cumberland Wildlife Management Area. And we are still in the process of purchasing a conservation easement there whereas we've leased it historically in the past for the last 30 years. And it's a very large unit. It's 43,000 acres. And so when we are acquiring this interest in it, the Nature Conservancy, who has purchased it, still owns the underlying fee. If you have any questions about that, we can talk about that. But basically, we're going to own the recreational rights there, and they're still going to own the land itself. And we've inherited quite a lot of sort of clandestine OHV trails up there. And they had, the Nature Conservancy had applied for a grant from Yamaha to help close off some of those trails and help get the trails we want to keep signed and maintained. So they applied for this $38,000 grant and they received it. And they think that if we are able to provide a match to them, that we can have a pretty good budget to work up there in the next few years. And you've already approved some positions for OHV going into next year's budget that we'll be working on this project. So what we're talking about is $114,000 of PR funds, wildlife restoration funds. So what that means is if we put this in the budget, we'll get reimbursed 100% of the money we put into it with federal funds. So that's my first ask. 38,000 with a 75% match of 104. The total's 114,000 is what I'm asking for. The second one, I guess I should ask if there's any questions on this first one. I need to explain a little better.
So if you put that in the budget, then it's my understanding that we'll get 100% of it back. So it's not going to cost us anything.
That's right.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yep. Anybody else? Okay. The second one I'm asking for is money to reimburse our own Josh Campbell in biodiversity. He kindly let me borrow some money from one of his main operating budgets to do a baseline conservation easement report for the Ed Carter unit. And that was a pretty pricey item in that we had to get a consulting firm to go in and give us the conditions of that land at the time we're taking the conservation easement. So I'm asking for $65,000 to replace those funds into Josh's existing budget. We're looking at 100% wetland funds because this is eligible for wetland funds. And I may wind up being able to match that to a grant as well, probably state wildlife grants, which is the non-game grant program that we operate off of.
Any questions about So you're asking for $179,000.
Yes, I think that is what I'm asking for.
All right, on timing, these projects were unknown or unavailable in the regular budget cycle.
They were. I did not know about the Nature Conservancy's grant, and I didn't have any PR money that wasn't already spoken for at that time. And then this conservation easement report, I didn't get that done until after the budget cycle.
Okay, well, there was just a discussion about trying not to do expansions as best we could. Of course, if the timing's not right, but there's a reason I asked that question. Or any other discussion on these expansions? Do I hear a motion from the Budget Committee, please? Need a second?
Second.
Any discussion from the commission or the audience? Any questions? All in favor? Excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, so the OHV, and so this is, I didn't know this was coming up, and this is up in close to the units where I live.
Yeah.
And I know that the off-road vehicle business draws a lot of tourism and a lot of, there's a lot of counties up there, some of them which may be considered distressed, that depend on off-road vehicles for tourism dollars and part of their economic resource. Is there a more explanation to these? Has there been dialogue with the local governments? And
not particularly about this particular unit, because managing this activity is fairly new to us, as we're going to be new owners, so to speak. There's been a lot of dialogue with the local governments about how we manage OHV on the rest of North Cumberland WMA on the Sunquist units, New River, and Royal Blue. So yeah, it's whatever we can do to sort of come up with our legitimate trails, have things laid out in a way that's organized, and keep unlicensed or illegal use, I guess, off of some of these rogue trails that are created. Because as with everything, 99% of the people do great and stay on the designated trails, and 1% get off of them and tear things up. And it's important to us because North Cumberland is the highest biodiversity area in the state. And so we want to make sure that those habitats are protected.
so is there like a narrative that supports these requests?
There may be for the TNC put together for their grant proposal, but I've never put anything together for it. And it's, we do operate off of other grant money on other parts of the WMA to manage OHV trails. I think we've got the maximum amount we can get. It comes from the Recreational Trails Program that TDEC administrates. And on those units that we do manage and actively manage, we get 80% of our money back.
So is your question whether we need to have OHV trails or not? Is that what you're getting at?
No, my question is, so we're asking for reimbursable funds to, and you made the statement to shut down some of the trails. And I'd like to, I'm not trying to get in the middle here or anything, but being from that part of the country, it would be nice to have some kind of narrative that supports that. We have to close this trail because of the biodiversity that exists in this particular spot, or people are using this particular spot illegally, so we need to shut it down, or it's dangerous. Just something to, if I get questions, that I can answer those questions.
Yeah. I think the Nature Conservancy, because they are the ones that own the land itself, they're going to push us a lot more towards assisting with management on those issues, and we need it, frankly. And I think they've already calculated there's like 200 miles of trails on that 43,000 acres, and that's going to be greatly reduced, and we got to keep them off the Cumberland Trail. And there's just There's a lot of interest in doing that. I'm just not sure it's ever been pulled together into a document.
Okay. I agree. I mean,
Mhm.
there's some areas around that part of the country that look rough. If there was some narrative that said, okay, we're not shutting down everything, we're keeping these, but there's a certain portion of them that we need to shut down because they're dangerous or they impact, a biodiversity,
Sure.
biodiversic region or whatever. I don't know if that's a word.
I'm trying to get, what the money I'm asking for is going to be administered by Region 4.
Okay.
And Region 4 is working with them on some of that type of planning. So something ought to come out of it. I just
I
I'm
don't
not privy
want,
to it.
I don't want there to be a miscommunication that, TWRA is trying
Yeah.
to shut down all the trails.
Oh,
And
I
so
hear
just,
you.
just something that, just a little bit of support right there that we can explain it would be great.
See what we can do.
So another example of the benefit of an Office of Public Information.
I'll second that.
Yeah. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
You gonna do a real estate report today or tomorrow? Okay, well, it's listed, so I didn't know whether you were gonna prepare to do it today or not. Mr. Tarkington?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There should be a 2-page report for you, either in your book or on your laptop. I'm reporting through the month of August. At the top of the report.
Again, we don't have our iPads or printed copies today, so
Okay, then it should be up here,
if it's on the slide,
or I'll let you look on with me.
if it's up there, it's fine.
Okay, the boating fund, I'm reporting through the month of August. The boating fund has approximately 600,000 more than a projection on the boat registrations and is approximately 11% or has used 11% of the allotment on the expenses. Next one is the wildlife fund. Wildlife has collected about 62,000 more than had been projected on license income. And the expense to total through August is approximately 9% of the allotment for the year. Next one is the wetland, 6,000 balance in it. And the last slide, last page, shows the reserve balances and the amounts in the SPIF and the investment. And I believe last month, Commissioner Cox, you had asked about investing the balance that it was felt could be invested, not needed for a period of time to earn a greater amount of income with the Treasury. And in round terms, that would be approximately 4 months worth of expenses in wildlife and about 5 in boating. And this is purely my guess. Boating is a much smaller fund, and their cash flow is a little more irregular during the winter months. That's why I opted to go to a 5th month. I've talked to the representative at the Treasury, and subject to your approval, we can probably affect this next week. Also, next month would be the 3rd month or a end of a quarter, so to speak, since we transferred the funds from the endowment, the lifetime, and the watchable. So those excess funds that are not needed there or have been built up there, I guess is a better term, we'll transfer those funds at that time.
Do you have a number
I
on those
do.
percentages?
We're looking at about 24 million in wildlife and about 6 million in boating.
That you would not transfer,
No, that we would.
that you would transfer?
Yes, sir.
All right, so you're keeping 28.
28 and 4, right.
Okay.
And if we find that that's too little, we can transfer more. If it's too much, we can
I understand.
ask the Treasury to liquidate.
And the
return.
watchable We've got 8 million. Are you talking about transferring that 8,256,000 along with it?
Next month? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, you would include that, so you'd have
Next month. Right.
38 million. What is it? 38, how much? If you added it up, total that you would
No,
transfer?
sir, but I mean, whatever it comes up to is what we'll have another month next month, so we'll have a larger balance in both watchable and
All right, so to make a
in the
proper
lifetime.
motion is what I'm getting at. That we would,
Well, would you want me to come back to you next month and have a more updated figure
well,
of transfer?
can you do it tomorrow?
I can't
Or in
foresee
general
that far.
terms, then I guess I would be looking for a motion, approval for the budget committee for the staff to transfer funds over a 4-month in wildlife and 5 months in boating, plus the total in the watchable wildlife as of the date of transfer.
Okay.
Is that
I think that
would
be
that be
fine.
a proper motion?
Yes, sir.
All right, I need a second.
Second.
Any discussion, questions about what we're doing? Transferring out of the spiff account into the Treasury's managed account. Yes, sir.
So, Ken, when we do this, and you obviously can't get it today, but it would be really interesting to see, because we're talking about such a big amount of money here.
Oh, I can come back to you and tell you what it is. Yes, sir.
And what
That's
we
I would
think
plan
that
to
will
do.
mean to us on an annual basis, compared to what we're getting now, because that's the whole goal, right? To get.
Yes, sir. And I believe the Treasury gave you their estimate.
But that was prior to the move, right?
And I certainly can't do any better than they can. But what I can tell you is there is a greater chance of having a greater earnings over a longer period of time with the investment than with the SPIF account. The SPIF is a month to month, and the investment is going to be for, depending on what they invest in, whatever they told us. I believe some are 10 years, some are 20, some are 30. And some of those are 2%, some are 3%. You hold it to the maturity date, and that's what you receive on.
Ken, maybe it would be helpful if between now and December, you would talk to Treasury or the Treasurer's office and ask them to give us an updated number on income on our investment. I'm not talking about the value of the base amount, because it fluctuates because of the market. I'm talking about how much money we've made on the investment. And they gave us that figure of like $9 million or something like that.
Well, I do have, you're wanting on a year-to-date basis.
Well,
And what I do have from them, and actually what we're looking at is, let me go back. That middle column where it says year-to-date is a little bit of a misnomer, because that identifies the amount of funds that are there now versus what was there previously. And we transferred a bunch. What you're interested in is the actual earnings. If you look at wildlife and boating, down at the bottom, 0.56% on a year-to-date basis, thus far, that's what the actual investments have earned, because we've not transferred any money in wildlife and boating since the first of the year. In fact, we haven't done it since the initial
So you're
stages.
talking about the SPIF account.
No, sir, I'm talking about the investment. The SPIF is paying 0.2. I believe that's what that says at the bottom, 0.2%.
0.02, but what about the 0.56 is year to date for July the 1st?
That's correct.
Okay, but I'm looking for a number from Treasury's office
I can certainly ask them.
about the investment of X dollars and how much we have earned
From
from total from
time?
inception.
Oh.
From when we.
I have that.
it was like $9 million when we had our budget meeting.
Well, that's basically what it's showing now, 9.1. And since inception is 11.06%.
Would you call them and ask them so you
Sure.
have up to date in
Be glad to.
December in dollars, how much money we've earned on our investment? Please.
Okay.
Okay.
What they report that each month. The gain is 9.174.
Since the inception. That doesn't sound like enough.
Actually, we would have to factor out what we transferred to them in August.
You're a
We go back
typical
month.
accountant. You know that?
If I might interject, Commissioner, I think
Yes, sir.
certainly if with some time over the figures, we can start to gauge kind of an average earning that the fund has done since its inception with that style of investment. And then we can put some numbers behind what we expect.
Yeah.
The additional investment of these dollars will add to that return that we can extrapolate over some months if you give us a little time.
Yep. I'm not trying to be too technical, Ken. I know you're
It's
trying to answer the
essentially
question,
still,
but
it's
you're-
$9+
Yeah.
million.
Okay.
Either way we look at
Right.
it. That figure shows one thing. I can go back
And
to
that would
before
help.
we transfer.
That would help answer
Sure.
Commissioner Granberry's question about how much the return's going to be on this. So I've got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Any more questions?
Just for clarification, the watchable fund is our share of the revenue that comes from the generation sales of the plates, license plate?
That's correct.
Okay.
Of the Bluebird plate.
Not bear, not turkey?
Not bear, not turkey, no, sir. That goes in our general revenue.
So that's just from the Bluebird?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any more questions, please? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's all we got, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cox. I'm going to call Darren Ryder to the podium. I think he has something to tell us.
I got nothing. So I apologize to the commissioner and thank you for giving me the podium for this couple minutes. So it just came together about 15 minutes ago that we have an employee that's going to retire and it's going to be his last time in front of you as a commission, as a board. And certainly he is worthy of being recognized. And that's Lieutenant Colonel Cape Taylor. He retires in December and he's got a conflict with the meeting tomorrow. I thought he was going to be here tomorrow, found out he's not. So if it's okay, I'd like to bring him up here. I know he's going to shoot me. He has no idea. So Cape, he started in night. I'm glad you told me you weren't going to be here tomorrow. And I thought, oh, crap. So he started in 1987 in Macon County, and I had started in 86 in Macon County. I left and went to Cheatham, and he came in behind me in Macon. And then when I left Macon, I went to Cheatham, and then he left Macon and went to Montgomery. So needless to say, we have worked together a lot. We won't mention, man, Ken Solid Gold Club back in 1995. We won't mention that. Well, we won't mention shooting deer at night on the Abamasum study. That was unusual to say the least. But Cape's career was a county officer in Montgomery for several years. And then back when we had areas, he was an assistant area supervisor, which is equivalent to today's lieutenant. Then Cape promoted to the area supervisor, which is now the current captain. Then he left that position. And now he became the Regional II Major. And then how many years up there at the office?
2004.
So in 14, he promoted to the lieutenant colonel in that current position. But Cape is a forward-thinker. He's an innovator. He's progressive, and he's old school. And that old school is going to be hard to replace. So I can't thank him enough for the service he's done for the agency and for law enforcement in particular. So thank you, man.
Thank you, Darren. Darren's right. I didn't expect this. I thought I was going to get out of here without having to stand up, because this is my last meeting. I'm not going to be here tomorrow, and of course November's off, and December's after my date of retirement. So this will be the last time I'm here. But I sure appreciate Darren bringing me up into the law enforcement division in 2014. I think that we've been able to accomplish a lot of things that help our officers in the field. Along with commission support, we've been able to bring in our new radio system, bring it up to the current place where it's at, which is really a safety issue for our officers. We've added a CAD system, which creates good transparency. So we know where our officers at, and if they get in trouble, if they get down, if there's something goes wrong, we'll know it and we can get to them. So, we've just had an opportunity to create some good equipment for safety for these officers. So really proud and pleased with that. Darren said I went to work in Macon County in 1987. I interviewed in the very office up there, the conference room in that office where we do interviews for officers now. And I never sit down there and I don't think about that. Just completely blessed to have been with this agency for 34 years. And the one thing that remains solid and sound throughout all my years of working here is my love for this agency and its employees. There's nobody in the agency that somehow hadn't touched my career. And these officers and supervisors and all the persons that I've worked with in our division and across the divisions in wildlife and fisheries as well. It's just been a huge blessing for me and my family. And all the spouses and children of game wardens, they know what it's like to live with a game warden. It's not an easy task. It's hard on your kids. It's hard on your wife. When we went to work, our names and phone numbers were in the hunting guide. So our wives were the secretary. They would take calls and read the hunting guide to people because they couldn't understand what it said apparently. But that's what we did. And now it's transitioned now to where we carry a cell phone with us all the time. So we're entertaining calls on our own, and our wives got a break there. And, you don't get to go to all these things on the weekends with your children and go to ball games, and wife has to go to travel ball and do those things. But, it's a trade-off. And I'll tell everybody that we hire that it's a trade-off. If you spend quality time during the times you have, you can make up for all that. So it's been a blessing. And I hope that over the years after I leave, that one thing remains status here is that we always work toward making good decisions for the sportsmen of Tennessee and for what's good for conservation of our wildlife to make sure it's here down the road. And I appreciate all y'all for doing that. And the commissioners that came before y'all that I've worked with. And just thank y'all so much for doing that, and all of the staff that does that. And that's in our mind all the time, is to do the right thing for the resource and for the hunters and the sportsmen. And I appreciate everything everybody's done for me, the division that I've worked at. We've got Mary and Betsy that both worked in our office up there, and then the current staff that's up there. And it's very humbling to me to be able to go out of this after 34 years, and I've really enjoyed it. And I appreciate everybody that's been a part of that. Thank y'all.
We're going to have an event for him later at Buffalo Ridge. I just wanted to get him before y'all, before his last meeting. He's one of the original bad boys. You remember that bad boys? When we started in the late 80s, we were the bad boys. He's a bad boy.
Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to say something too. So it does look like it was a last minute planned thing for Cape. And that's because we had discuss having a going away thing recognition at the December meeting. I thought his last day was the end of December, assuming he would be. I should have checked with him, but I apologize for that. But anyway, Cape is one of those guys too. Everything Darren said is so true about Cape and his not only his attitude, but he's one of those enforcement folks that has the right attitude about what we should view law enforcement. That is not, everything is not totally black and white. There's a lot of gray area there. Officers should use discretion, and they do. And Cape always promoted that. And so, Cape, we thank you for your years of service. Thank you for everything you've done. And we're going to miss meeting and discussing and talking with him and asking for advice, but also his friendship. So, thank you.
All right. We'll miss you, Cape. And you bring to mind something that I encountered this past week. We had a wildlife officer who died over in East Tennessee, and Commissioner Kent Woods and I went to his service on Sunday, and I don't think I've ever seen a more moving and powerful show of camaraderie than all of these wildlife officers. There were probably 75 or 80 wildlife officers who came from all over the state to honor this man. And we had our honor guard there. And it was one of the most proud moments of my life to be a little part of this organization. And Cape, you've epitomized what these officers are and what they do, and we appreciate you very, very much. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.